Holidays to all of you.
Thank you, Jim, for those lovely remarks. Next, I'd like to welcome Elisabeth Rhyne, who's the Managing Director at the Center for Financial Inclusion at Axion International. She works to bring together leaders in financial services to address challenges facing the microfinance industry today. She's the co-creator of the SMART campaign for client protection in microfinance. As Senior Vice President of Axion from 2000 to 2008, Ms. Rhyne led Axion's initial entry into Africa and India and directed the organization's research efforts to develop new financial products and managed Axion's publications and educational activities. Ms. Rhyne has published numerous articles and 5 books on microfinance, including The New World of Microenterprise Finance, Building Healthy Financial Institutions for the Poor, co-edited with our honoree tonight, Undersecretary Maria Otero. Ladies and gentlemen, Elisabeth Rhyne.
You were right, Jim. It's bright. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much to SID for giving me this privilege to talk about 2 things that are extremely dear to me, Maria Otero and microfinance, and also the great joy of sharing the stage with my old friend, Jim Boomgard. I've been asked to squeeze 25 years of outstanding accomplishment and great friendship into 6 minutes. I don't know, it's crazy. Just after I met Maria, and that was at the same time as Jim. Jim, Maria, and I, we all met at the same time, all back from living overseas. And I started working at USAID. I was a brand new aid staffer, and I was sent to face a room full of cranky NGO representatives. And you know how cranky NGO representatives can be when faced with a USAID bureaucrat. I was definitely over my head. There was one sweet old man. He would not stop droning. And Maria, whom I'd barely met, was back in the back of the room, and she caught my eye, and she went, I didn't know what to do. How could I interrupt this sweet old man politely? He kept going, and I started getting anxious. Then Maria caught my eye again, and this time she went. So I took the cue, and I've been taking cues from Maria ever since, and I know she'll stop me if I go on too long now. Maria taught me a lot. Especially about leadership, and I think probably about diplomacy too. And one of those things is that it takes all of your being. It takes heart, it takes brains, and it takes body. On the heart side, I think what makes Maria so special is an uncanny talent she has for creating an immediate connection with people, whether it's a fish seller in a market in Mozambique, or Richard Gere, or George Clooney. But her leadership even involved body, and by that I mean dancing. Maria is a dancing fool. She pulled us all onto the dance floor at Axion at every opportunity, and you may think that's just trivial, but what's going on there is enabling everyone at Axion to see themselves as part of a vibrant and life-affirming and positive enterprise. And that spirit carried over into the work that we did. I think if Maria has a Christmas wish for the US government, it's probably for more dancing at the State Department. Jim set the stage in talking about Maria's early contributions to microfinance. And let me just take a moment to highlight her contributions as CEO of Axion during the decade from 2000 to 2010. Maria transformed Axion from a Latin American-only operation into a truly global organization. And when I consider that, I think that that is one of the things that prepared her best for working at the State Department. She knew her home region like the back of her hand, and that enabled her to use that grounding as a springboard to connect with new partners in other parts of the world, in Africa, in India, and China. Thanks to Maria's leadership and her determination in the face of board members who were recalcitrant, staff members who only knew how to speak Spanish, and other obstacles, she saw her way clear to move Acción into its global status today, and today it works in 29 countries around the world. One of the things that Maria worked on very early and was really spearheading was the creation of Acción Investments in Microfinance, which is one of the first microfinance equity funds of any scale. And this is a good time to talk about that because last month Acción Investments just closed after 10 years. It provided a positive and attractive return to investors and to Acción. Acción is then able to use those proceeds to work on developing microfinance institutions in unserved, difficult, and very poor places, places like Cameroon, Lagos, Nigeria, and Bihar, India. That ability to take equity investments, make money from microfinance, and channel it again into the field and to serving more people is why the commercial model of microfinance that was pioneered by Acción really under Maria's leadership, that's why it's so important. And when you think about that going on during that period, one of the things that microfinance commercial model laid the groundwork for is today's impact investing world, which is taking off so much. Maria was always an industry builder. She loved Acción, but I think she loved the industry of microfinance still more. She was great at spotting needs and quickly devising very creative responses. For example, she noticed that the CEOs of microfinance institutions around the world needed professional development, and what she did next was to create an executive education program for them, which is still going at Harvard Business School. She saw that equity investors in microfinance needed to develop a set of common best practices as they develop their industry, and she created a forum for that, the Council of Microfinance Equity Funds. She always had the true north in mind as she negotiated through all this, that the microfinance movement was about creating global social enterprises with the conviction that the poor are valued customers and not recipients of charity, which I think is one of the fundamental tenets and fundamental contributions to development that microfinance has made. Most meaningful for me, recently, she helped launch the Center for Financial Inclusion, which I now run. We're an action tank that is devoted to helping microfinance shape its future. And please forgive me for a moment just to say that what we are most excited about is the Smart Campaign for Client Protection, which Maria encouraged. It's a campaign that's making client protection part of the DNA of microfinance. This is very important work. It's the most important, I think, work going on in microfinance right now, and is what we are developing, what we hope will be a fair trademark for microfinance. Today, when we look to the future of microfinance, we see that it's growing more diverse and expansive, new ranges of services. What really has been created through microfinance organizations like Acción, through the efforts of Maria and the other pioneers in the field, is an amazing platform for connecting with the world's poor. And on that platform, there is now a burst of innovation that's going on. It's a time of really great opportunity in the field, and that's no small part thanks to the work that Maria has done over her lifetime. I just want to end on a personal note. Maria has a wonderful Bolivian-American family, and they, as well as her husband Joe Eldridge and her son Justin, as well as her other children who are not here, unfortunately, tonight, David and Anna. They are really the source of the love, the laughter, and the leadership that shines through in all aspects of Maria's work. That family recently experienced the loss of a beloved member, and that's why I'm especially happy to have this chance tonight to celebrate just how much any life that is well lived, and Maria's in particular, matters to the people around the world that she has sought to serve, and matters just as much to the friends and colleagues like me who have been blessed to travel the road with her. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm here to introduce Maria Otero. First of all, thanks, Dan, for the honor of being this year's Gala chair. I'm particularly pleased by my appointment because I get to actually present the award to Maria, whom, in addition to being the tremendously accomplished professional that she is and that you've all heard about, is part of a family near and dear to my heart. One who knows the Otero family might say that they are too heartwarming as King Midas is to gold. They just make people around them feel well. Born in La Paz, Bolivia, Maria Otero is currently the highest-ranking Hispanic official at the State Department and the first Latina undersecretary in its history. Mrs. Otero was formerly the president and CEO of Acción International, a pioneer and leader in economic development, working in 25 countries around the globe. She is recognized as one of the world's leading experts on inclusive economic growth, women's issues, and international development. Prior to Acción, Ms. Otero was the economist for Latin America for the Women in Development Office at USAID. She also served for 5 years at the Center for Development and Population Activities. President Clinton appointed Mrs. Otero to the board of the United States Institute of Peace in 2000, a position that she held for 8 years, including one term as vice chair of the board. In June 2006, Mrs. Otero was appointed by UN Secretary General Kofi Annan to the UN Advisors Group on Inclusive Financial Sectors. She was an adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies in Washington, D.C., before joining the State Department. Maria Otero was sworn in as Undersecretary of State on August 10, 2009. She oversees and coordinates U.S. foreign relations on the spectrum of civilian security issues across the globe, including democracy, human rights, population, refugees, trafficking in persons, rule of law, counter-narcotics, crisis prevention and response, global criminal justice, and countering violent extremism. She also serves as the President's Special Representative for Tibetan issues. Of her many accomplishments, the following are some of the key initiatives she has worked on in her capacity at the State Department: a sustained diplomatic engagement on water security, launch and leadership of the Open Government Partnership, streamlined trafficking in persons into U.S. foreign policy priorities, and development of a global youth policy that integrates youth perspectives and voices into U.S. policy priorities. Mrs. Otero has chaired the board of Bread for the World and also served on the boards of the Calvert Foundation, Public Welfare Foundation, the Inter-American Foundation, and BRAC Holding of Bangladesh. She is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Mrs. Otero's awards and recognition include selection by Newsweek in October 2005 as one of the United States' 20 most influential women, Hispanic Business Magazine's Elite Women of 2007, Notre Dame University's Distinguished Service in Latin America Award, and the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. Mrs. Otero holds an MA in Literature from the University of Maryland, an MA in International Relations from Johns Hopkins University, and an honorary doctorate of Humane Letters from Dartmouth College. On behalf of the Washington chapter of the Society for International Development, it is my honor to present Maria Otero with the SID Washington Award for Leadership in Development for her profound contributions to the international development community. Please.
Thank you, Ignacio, for that wonderful introduction. It is such an honor to receive this award. It's such a privilege to walk in the footsteps of those that were honored before me. Jim is here, dear friend Aaron Williams as well, and others that have been also honored, Senator Lugar and Kerry, Andrew Natsios, and others that have been here. I want to especially thank the Society for International Development for really this humbling evening. And all the generous statements from friends and colleagues that we have just heard, I am so grateful. Jim and Beth have been part of my journey in all the work that I have done in microfinance, work that I could have never done without them. And to have them here honoring me this way is just so meaningful to me. I had to work pretty hard to keep Jim in line. That was as he mentioned, but I think we made some progress, actually. I, of course, also want to thank my husband, Joe Eldridge. As you heard earlier from Mike Posner, Joe is a lifelong human rights advocate, and his dedication and his commitment and his principled way of approaching the work that he did has clearly not only made a difference in the lives of so many people, but it has also served as an example for me and for our children, Justin, who is here, and David and Anna, who are not. So thank you, Joe. Stand up, Joe. And of course, I can't go anywhere without thanking my extraordinary mother, Maria Teresa, mother to 9 of us. She is the first woman who showed me, through mind, body, and soul, that we can do anything that we set out to do. As Beth mentioned earlier, our family suffered a great loss this last week. Is the passing of my younger brother, Pablo, a great man. So I want to take a moment tonight, this afternoon, this evening, to honor his memory and to honor the support and the help and the love that he gave me through my life. I want to take this award in his honor. And I want to tell you that there is nothing more comforting than to be here tonight in my community, my development community, the people that I've worked with, the faces that I have known for decades, to not only be able to give me comfort, but to affirm what is important in life and the value that we give each one that crosses our path. So thank you for being here tonight. Let me say a little bit about myself. You know, I think as we think about our professional lives, my professional life began not too far from here at the University of Maryland, where I was studying a topic that was very close to my heart, British Romantic literature. Yep, I was in love with John Keats, and there was nothing anybody could do about that. So I launched my career with a master's in British Romantic literature, a thesis on John Keats's poetic development under my arm, and moved forward towards the world with that in my hand. You can imagine how useful that was, right? But at some point in my 20s, I really felt almost a calling to go back to serve in the land of my childhood. Born in Bolivia, my roots were really in Latin America. So after taking a stint of 2 years at Johns Hopkins Sci so that I could learn a thing or two about development, I began my career and I started working at Acción International I worked there for almost 25 years, and my work began in Honduras, where I lived, the whole family lived for 3 years. It was at this time, as Jim was saying, that this phenomenon of microfinance was beginning to take traditional notions about banking and begin to turn them into their heads. What Acción was doing was trying to reach people who were living in the sprawling cities in Latin America initially. They were newly arrived migrants. They had no education. They had few skills. They had no connections. They had no safety nets. And they tried to survive in those cities. There were also some that lived off the land in rural areas or in small towns that had little infrastructure. I think all of you know the people that I'm talking about because they're the same people that you are trying to work with. But what Acción recognized early on was that in the absence of employment, these men and women could start their own business to support their families. They needed working capital to do this, and they needed a supportive loan officer or someone who could help them guide them in their work. Now, this seems like such an obvious notion right now that microfinance has matured and has moved across the world. But in those early days, no one thought that we were being innovative with this. They just thought that we were being crazy trying to do this work. I'm sure there are many of you here that have experienced that also in your own work. But it wasn't long before Acción and other pioneers in the field of microfinance started to see the poor through a new lens. They were no longer helpless. We began to see them as people who were resourceful, who were creative, and who were determined. Since those days, early on, which Jim and Beth have described, today an estimated 100 million plus people around the world have gained access to microcredit, and many millions more have their own savings accounts. With credits and savings, microfinance is expanding to include other financial services that we all have access to and that the poor also deserve access to, whether that's remittances or housing loans or insurance. All of these are becoming expansive enough so that we are now, after decades of doing this work, moving towards a trend of full financial inclusion, in which all people have access to a suite of productive, tailored financial products that are going to help them work themselves out of poverty. But this, as I said, this phenomenon, banking for the poor, did not happen overnight. In fact, these words, banking and poor, had hardly been placed in the same sentence before. Part of what broke the mold, allowing microfinance to be not only successful, but also sustainable, as Mike Posner mentioned, was this new lending methodology that used character as a collateral. Now, I want to emphasize this point because I think it's especially important in the context of what we all do in development. As development professionals, we are individuals who are committed to improving the lives of those less fortunate than us, but we all understand that the character of the poor is not something to be marginalized or to be taken for granted. SID's member organizations have created global impact in their work because obviously of the many smart people that are here in this room, no doubt. But your impact comes from a similar recognition of the innate potential, dignity, and value of every person, whether it's a poor vendor, a rural farmer, a new citizen, a recent immigrant, whoever. In other words, we all believe in using character as collateral. We believe that the determination and the creativity and the hard work of millions who lack access must be met by our own determination to impact on the laws, the regulations, the institutions that prevent economic empowerment from reaching the majority. Now, as I moved from Acción to the State Department, I took many lessons from my work in my time in microfinance and in international development. Here are three. The first one is that there is nothing micro about the human spirit. The poor and the disenfranchised are not hopeless, and they are also not helpless. They're vulnerable, yes, they are. But with the right policies, with the right tools, poor men and women can create better lives for themselves, and they can become active participants in their own societies, and hopefully subjects of their own destiny. The second lesson is that building strong local institutions, public, private, not-profit, is essential if the fabric of vital democracy and sustainable development is going to take hold. The third lesson that I have learned about our impact in the world is a reflection of our willingness to iterate, to self-correct, to recognize that none of us are doing things quite right yet. If we were, we would have solved the problems of the world already. So we have to continue being critically reflective, improving, and critically reflective again. And this was one lesson that Acción taught me year after year. And it's these lessons with the ones that I began my tenure as Undersecretary of State. First, I was Undersecretary for Democracy and Global Affairs, and then Secretary Clinton asked me to become Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy, and Human Rights, a larger set of responsibilities. When I look back at that time, almost 4 years ago, I felt compelled to respond to Secretary Clinton's call and to her vision for the positive role that America could play in the world. It was a vision in which the United States reached out to partners across the world just as that, as partners. It was a vision in which we would work not just with governments and bilateral relationships, but with international organizations, with the United Nations, with religious groups, with all parts of civil society. And it's a vision that seeks to elevate our government's civilian power to help address the challenges around the world. This was a vision that I wanted to help deliver. So armed with my lessons from Acción and from the years that I spent in microfinance, I committed myself to better understand how we as government can help other governments protect their citizens, protect their vulnerable populations from the threats that they encounter every day. And these threats that they encounter are very real. Most of these threats stem from the existence of weak democracies around the world, from human rights violations, especially among vulnerable populations, for example, gender-based violence, from the ravages of displacement and refugee life, which many of you know about,